Good evening. Get comfortable and settle in because tonight, we are adventuring down the road of another hero's story, Perseus. Long before the rise of great empires, before marble temples stood beneath the Mediterranean sun, and before philosophers gathered in the busy streets of Athens, people looked toward the stars and wondered about the world around them. Along the shores of ancient Greece, where the waves of the Aegean Sea gently touched the land, stories were carried from one generation to the next. They were told beside warm fires, beneath olive trees, and during long evenings when the sky grew dark and the constellations began to appear overhead. These were not stories written down in the beginning. They lived in memory, passed from storyteller to storyteller, changing slightly with each voice that carried them forward. They spoke of powerful gods who watched over humanity, of distant kingdoms hidden beyond familiar shores, and of heroes who stepped into a world filled with mystery and danger. Among these ancient tales was the story of Perseus. His journey begins not with triumph, but with fear. It begins with a king who hears a prophecy and becomes desperate to escape his fate. It begins with a mother and child cast away upon the open sea, left to the mercy of the waves. And it begins with a young boy who grows up unaware that his life will one day become one of the greatest legends ever told. Perseus was not the strongest warrior of Greek mythology. He did not carry the immense power of some heroes who came after him. Instead, his greatest gifts were his courage, his cleverness, and his willingness to step into the unknown. His path would lead him across ancient seas and forgotten lands. He would encounter mysterious creatures, receive gifts from the gods themselves, and face one of the most famous monsters in all of mythology, Medusa, the Gorgon whose gaze could turn any living creature to stone. But the story of Perseus is not only about monsters and battles. Beneath the surface, it is a story about fate and choice. It is about the things people fear, the impossible challenges they face, and the ways they discover strength they never knew they possessed. To the ancient Greeks, heroes were not simply people who defeated enemies. They were figures who represented the struggles of life itself. They faced uncertainty, loss, temptation, and difficult decisions. Their stories reflected the hopes and fears of the people who told them. The world of Perseus was a world of small kingdoms scattered across rugged landscapes. A world of fishermen and farmers, sailors and craftsmen, kings and queens. It was a world where the boundary between the natural and supernatural was thin, where a storm at sea could be seen as the anger of a god, and where a distant mountain peak might be believed to be the home of powerful beings. Imagine, for a moment, standing along the coast of Greece thousands of years ago. The evening air is cool. The scent of salt water drifts through the quiet streets of a small village. Beyond the shoreline, fishing boats rest gently upon the waves. Above you, the stars begin to appear, the same stars that ancient sailors used to guide their journeys across the sea. Somewhere nearby, an old storyteller begins to speak. They tell of a distant king named Perseus. They tell of his daughter Dani, locked away because of a terrible prediction. They tell of a golden light that entered a hidden chamber and the birth of a child destined for greatness. They tell of a wooden chest floating across the endless sea. And inside that chest, carried by the currents of fate, was a boy named Perseus. Tonight, we will follow his entire journey. We will travel through the kingdoms of ancient Greece, walk along forgotten shores, and enter the mysterious places where mythology and imagination meet. We will discover how Perseus came to possess the weapons of the gods, how he faced Medusa in her dark and distant home, how he rescued the Princess Andromeda from a terrible fate, and how his name became forever connected with the legends of Greece. So settle in, and allow the sounds of the ancient world to surround you. Listen to the distant waves rolling against the shore. Feel the gentle breeze moving through the olive trees. Look upward toward the stars that have watched over humanity for thousands of years. And as the night grows quieter, let us begin the tale of Perseus, the hero who was born from prophecy, carried by the sea, and remembered forever among the legends of ancient Greece. Before the name of Perseus was spoken beside glowing fires, before poets sang of his journeys across distant seas, and before his adventures became woven into the great tapestry of Greek mythology, there was a world very different from our own. It was a world of quiet villages scattered between mountains and coastlines. A world where the rhythm of life followed the movement of the sun, the changing seasons, and the endless motion of the sea. Thousands of years ago, the lands that would become known as Greece were home to many small kingdoms. Unlike the large nations that would rise later in history, ancient Greece was not one united country. Instead, it was a collection of independent cities and regions, each with its own rulers, traditions, and stories. The landscape itself shaped the people who lived there. Tall mountains stretched across the land, dividing communities from one another and creating valleys where small settlements could grow. Rocky hills gave way to fields of wheat and barley. Olive trees twisted their ancient branches toward the sky, providing food, oil, and a connection to the land that would last for generations. Beyond the shores, the deep blue waters of the Aegean Sea surrounded countless islands. These waters were both a barrier and a pathway. They separated kingdoms, but they also connected them. Sailors traveled between islands carrying goods, stories, and legends. Every voyage brought the possibility of discovery, danger, or adventure. It was in this world that the earliest Greek myths began to take shape. To the people of ancient Greece, the world was filled with forces they could not always understand. Storms, earthquakes, changing seasons, and the mysteries of life and death all seemed connected to something greater than humanity. The gods were believed to watch over every part of existence. The sea belonged to Poseidon, whose storms could either carry ships safely home or send them into chaos. The skies belonged to Zeus, whose thunder and lightning reminded mortals of his power. Athena represented wisdom and strategy, while Apollo guided music, prophecy, and healing. These gods were not distant ideas. They were part of everyday life. People built temples in their honor, offered prayers before journeys, and told stories about their actions. The myths of the gods explained the world around them and gave meaning to the challenges humans faced. But the ancient Greeks did not only tell stories about gods. They told stories about heroes. Heroes were figures who existed between the worlds of gods and humans. They were often born into extraordinary circumstances and faced challenges far beyond ordinary people. They battled monsters, explored unknown lands, and overcame impossible obstacles. Yet heroes were not perfect. They experienced fear, pride, grief, and uncertainty. They made mistakes and suffered consequences. Their stories were powerful because they reflected the struggles of being human. Long before Perseus became famous, the Greeks told tales of other legendary figures. They spoke of ancient kings, warriors, and descendants of gods. These stories helped connect families and kingdoms to a distant, heroic past. For many Greek rulers, claiming a connection to a legendary hero was a way of showing that their family had a special place in the world. This was especially true for the royal family of Argos. Argos was one of the oldest and most important cities of ancient Greece. Located in the fertile region of the Peloponnese, it was surrounded by mountains and rich farmland. Its people cultivated crops, raised animals, crafted tools, and built ships that carried them across the sea. The city had a long tradition of kings and legends. According to Greek mythology, its rulers were connected to ancient heroes and divine ancestry. But even the greatest kingdoms were not free from fear. The people of this age believed deeply in the power of prophecy. A prophecy was not simply a prediction of what might happen. It was often viewed as a message from forces beyond human control. Kings and ordinary people alike sought the guidance of oracles, mysterious figures believed to speak with divine knowledge. Before making important decisions, Leaders might travel great distances to ask questions about the future. But knowing the future did not always bring comfort. Sometimes, a prophecy could become a burden. A person who learned what was destined to happen might spend their entire life trying to prevent it, only to discover that their actions had led them closer to the very fate they feared. This idea would become central to the story of Perseus. His tale would begin with a king named Acrisius, a man who possessed wealth, power, and authority, but who carried a fear that no crown could remove. He would learn of a prophecy that threatened everything he had built, a prophecy involving his own family, a prophecy involving a child who had not yet been born, and a prophecy that would set into motion a chain of events that would send a young hero across the ancient world. But before Perseus could face monsters, before he could receive gifts from the gods, and before his name could echo through history, the story had to begin with a single kingdom, a fearful king, and a future that no one could escape. Under the warm Mediterranean sun, among the hills and shores of ancient Greece, the first pages of the legend were waiting to be written. In the ancient kingdom of Argos, where golden fields stretched beneath the Mediterranean sun and the walls of the city watched over generations of kings, there lived a ruler named Acrisius. Like many kings of the ancient world, Acrisius had spent his life seeking security. He had inherited a throne, commanded armies, and ruled over a prosperous land. His palace stood as a symbol of his authority, filled with treasures brought from distant places and surrounded by servants who carried out his every command. From the outside, Acrisius appeared to possess everything a person could desire. But deep within the walls of his palace, the king carried a worry that troubled his thoughts. He had no son. In the ancient kingdoms of Greece, the continuation of a royal family was considered one of the most important responsibilities of a ruler. A son could inherit the throne, continue the family line, and preserve the legacy of the king long after his death. Without an heir, the future of Argos felt uncertain. Yet Acrisius did have one child, a daughter named Danae. She was said to be beautiful, intelligent, and beloved by those around her. But in a world where kings often measured their legacy through sons and warriors, her birth did not remove the king's concerns. Acrisius wondered what would happen after him. Who would rule Argos? Who would carry his name forward? And what fate awaited his kingdom when he was gone? Seeking answers, the king turned toward the mysterious world of prophecy. In ancient Greece, prophecies held incredible power. They were believed to come from divine sources and offered glimpses into events that had not yet happened. Kings traveled great distances to consult sacred places where priests and priestesses interpreted messages from the gods. But prophecy was a dangerous gift. To know the future could bring wisdom, but it could also bring fear. Sometimes the knowledge of what was coming caused people to make choices that unknowingly led them closer to the very fate they hoped to avoid. According to the legend, Acrisius traveled to the oracle at Delphi, one of the most sacred places in all of Greece. High among the slopes of Mount Parnassus, the oracle was believed to speak with the voice of Apollo, the god of prophecy. There, surrounded by temples, offerings, and generations of sacred tradition, Acrisius asked the question that had weighed upon him. He wanted to know what the future held for his family. But the answer he received was not the one he expected. The oracle revealed that Acrisius would never have a son to inherit his throne. Instead, his daughter Danae would give birth to a child. And that child would one day become the cause of Acrisius' death. The prophecy was simple. The prophecy was terrifying. Acrisius would be killed by his own grandson. For a moment, the king's greatest fear was no longer about his kingdom lacking an heir. It was about the possibility that the heir who came through his own bloodline would become his greatest threat. The prophecy followed Acrisius back to Argos like a shadow. The king was trapped between two impossible choices. If he allowed Danae to marry and have children, he risked bringing about the very fate he feared. But if he prevented her from having a family, he would be denying his own daughter the life she deserved. Instead of accepting the uncertainty of the future, Acrisius chose to fight against it. He believed that if he could control every detail of Danae's life, he could escape destiny itself. The king began searching for a way to prevent the prophecy from coming true. He could not kill his own daughter. Despite his fear, Danae was still his child, and the bond between parent and child was powerful. So he chose another path. He decided that Danae must never have the opportunity to meet anyone who could become the father of her child. According to some versions of the myth, Acrisius ordered a chamber built beneath the earth or a sealed room made of bronze. It was a place designed to keep his daughter completely separated from the outside world. Inside this hidden chamber, Danae would live away from the sight of men and away from the possibility of marriage. The king believed he had created a perfect solution. He believed stone walls and locked doors could defeat fate. But the ancient Greeks understood something that appears again and again in their myths. Human beings can make choices, but they cannot always control the consequences. The gods, destiny, and the forces of the universe moved in ways beyond human understanding. And while Acrisius looked upon his carefully constructed prison and believed he had prevented the future, something far beyond his control was already beginning to unfold. Because even the strongest walls could not keep out the will of the gods. And soon, within that hidden chamber beneath the palace of Argos, a remarkable event would take place. An event that would change the fate of Danae, the fate of King Acrisius, and the fate of the child who would one day become known as Perseus. Deep beneath the palace of Argos, hidden away from the world above, lived Princess Danae. The chamber built by King Acrisius was meant to be a place where destiny could never reach. The king believed that by separating his daughter from the outside world, he could prevent the prophecy from coming true. No visitors were allowed. No suitors could approach. No possibility of marriage or children could enter the carefully guarded room. To Acrisius, the walls represented safety. To Danae, they represented a life taken away before it had even begun. Though she was the daughter of a king, she lived like a prisoner. The sounds of the kingdom continued above her, the footsteps of servants, the voices of guards, the distant activity of the palace. But she remained separated from the life that moved around her. The ancient stories do not tell us exactly how long Danae lived within this confinement. Some versions describe years passing as she waited in solitude, while others focus only on the mysterious moment when her fate changed forever. But beneath the quiet surface of the palace, something beyond the control of King Acrisius was already unfolding. The Greeks believed that the gods could appear in many forms. They could walk among humans disguised as strangers, send messages through dreams, or influence the world through signs and wonders. And the greatest of the gods was Zeus, ruler of Mount Olympus. Zeus was associated with the sky, storms, justice, and kingship. As the god who ruled over both gods and mortals, his actions often changed the course of human lives. According to legend, Zeus saw Danae hidden away in her chamber. And despite the efforts of Acrisius, the walls meant to keep destiny away could not stop the will of the gods. One day, a strange and beautiful light entered the chamber. Some versions of the story describe it as a shower of golden light falling from the heavens. Others describe it simply as a mysterious presence sent by Zeus. From this divine encounter, Danae became pregnant. Months later, a child was born, a son, a child who would one day become one of the greatest heroes of Greek mythology. His name was Perseus. The birth of Perseus was both a miracle and a disaster. For Danae, the child represented hope. After years of loneliness, she was no longer alone. She had someone to love, someone to protect, and someone who gave meaning to her life within the cold walls of her prison. But for King Acrisius, the birth of this child meant only one thing. The prophecy had begun. When Acrisius discovered that Danae had given birth to a son, his fear returned stronger than ever. The child he had tried so desperately to prevent now existed. The future he had spent years avoiding had arrived. Yet even in his fear, Acrisius faced a difficult choice. The child was innocent. Perseus had done nothing wrong. He was simply a baby, unaware of prophecies, kingdoms, and the fears of kings. The king could not bring himself to kill his own daughter and grandson. Instead, he chose a different solution. He ordered a large wooden chest to be built. Inside this chest, he placed Danae and the infant Perseus. Then, rather than leaving them within the kingdom, he carried the chest to the shoreline and set it upon the open sea. It was an act of desperation. Acrisius hoped that the sea would decide their fate. If they survived, perhaps they would never return. If they perished, perhaps the prophecy would finally be defeated. The chest was pushed into the water. The waves carried it away from the shores of Argos. And as the current pulled Danae and Perseus into the vast blue waters, the kingdom slowly disappeared behind them. Imagine that journey across the ancient sea. A mother holding her newborn child as the wooden chest drifts beneath the endless sky. The sun rising and setting over the waves. The stars appearing each night, guiding sailors who traveled across the same waters. There were no maps, no certainty, and no promise of safety. Only the movement of the sea. For Danae, this journey must have been filled with fear. She had lost her home, her family, and the protection of her kingdom. She had no idea where the waves would carry them or what waited beyond the horizon. But she also carried something that Acrisius could not take away. The ancient Greeks often saw the sea as a symbol of transformation. It separated the known world from the unknown. It carried away the old and delivered people into new beginnings. And for Danae and Perseus, the sea became the path that would lead them toward a new life. After drifting for some time, the chest finally reached the shores of another land, the island of Seriphos, a small and rocky island in the Aegean Sea, far from the powerful kingdom of Argos. There, a new chapter of Perseus' story would begin. The child who had been abandoned by a fearful king would be discovered by a fisherman. The baby who had been cast away would grow up beneath unfamiliar skies. And the boy who was meant to bring about his grandfather's downfall would slowly begin the journey toward becoming a legendary hero. For now, however, Perseus was simply a child carried across the sea, unaware of the destiny waiting for him. The waves had taken him away from the only home he could have known. But they had also carried him toward the adventure that would make his name immortal. The sea carried Danae and her infant son far away from the kingdom of Argos. The walls of her father's palace disappeared beyond the horizon. The familiar lands of her childhood were replaced by endless waves and an uncertain future. She had been a princess, the daughter of a powerful king, but now she was simply a mother protecting her child as they drifted through the vast waters of the Aegean Sea. 4 days, perhaps even longer, the wooden chest moved with the currents. The wind guided its journey. The waves lifted and lowered it beneath the open sky. During the day, Danae would have seen only the endless blue of the sea surrounding her. At night, she would have looked upward at the stars, wondering where they would lead her and whether the gods had abandoned her or were quietly guiding her toward a new beginning. Eventually, the chest reached the shores of Seriphos. Unlike the powerful kingdom of Argos, Seriphos was a small and rugged island. It was not a place of grand palaces or mighty armies. It was a quiet corner of the ancient Greek world, shaped by the sea and the lives of fishermen who depended upon its waters. The island's rocky coastline rose above the waves. Small boats rested along the shore, and the voices of fishermen echoed through the harbors as they prepared their daily journeys. Here, among ordinary people living simple lives, the future hero Perseus would begin his childhood. The discovery of the chest is one of the most peaceful moments in the legend. According to the ancient stories, a fisherman named Dictys found it along the shore. Some versions describe him as casting his nets near the water when he noticed something unusual. Others tell of the chest simply washing ashore after a long journey. Curious, Dictys opened the wooden container and discovered Danae and the baby inside. Rather than turning them away, Dictys welcomed them. He brought them into his home and offered them protection. In a story filled with kings, gods, monsters, and impossible challenges, this simple act of kindness became one of the most important moments in Perseus' life. Because before Perseus became a hero, he was simply a child who needed someone to care for him. Under the gentle skies of Seriphos, Danae and Perseus began a new life. The island became their home. The sounds of the sea replaced the halls of the palace. The voices of fishermen replaced the commands of servants. And instead of growing up surrounded by royalty, Perseus grew up among ordinary people who knew the value of hard work, courage, and resilience. The young boy would have watched the fishermen leave the shore each morning, their boats moving toward the horizon in search of their daily catch. He would have seen farmers tending small fields, craftsmen shaping tools, and families gathering together as the sun disappeared behind the hills. This was a very different world from the one his grandfather had known. King Acrisius had tried to control destiny through walls and isolation, but destiny had carried Perseus somewhere unexpected. Far away from the fears of a king, the child of prophecy was growing quietly on a small island. As Perseus grew older, he became known for his strength, kindness, and adventurous spirit. The legends describe him as a remarkable young man, respected by those around him. But there was something else that made him different. Although he was raised far from the throne of Argos, Perseus carried within him the bloodline of kings and gods. He was the son of Danae and, according to the myth, the son of Zeus. This divine ancestry would later become an important part of his identity. The Greeks often believed that great heroes possessed a connection to the gods, giving them abilities and destinies beyond those of ordinary people. Yet Perseus' early life was not defined by power. It was defined by family. His relationship with Danae shaped the person he would become. She had endured isolation, fear, and uncertainty to protect him. She had crossed the sea inside a wooden chest and faced an unknown future because she loved her child. The bond between mother and son became one of the strongest parts of his story. But peace on Seriphos would not last forever. As Perseus grew into adulthood, another figure entered his life. A man who would change the course of his journey. His name was Polydectes. Polydectes was the king of Seriphos and the brother of Dictys, the fisherman who had rescued Danae and Perseus. Unlike his brother, however, Polydectes was not remembered for kindness. He was ambitious, proud, and determined to get what he wanted. When Polydectes first saw Danae, he became fascinated by her beauty. He desired her as his wife and believed that his position as king gave him the power to claim whatever he wished. But there was one obstacle: Perseus. The young man had grown strong and protective of his mother. He would not allow anyone, even a king, to treat Danae without respect. Polydectes soon realized that as long as Perseus remained near his mother, his plans would be difficult. And so, the peaceful life Perseus had known began to change. The fisherman's son, raised on a quiet island, would soon be drawn into a dangerous challenge. A challenge that would take him far beyond the shores of Seriphos. A challenge that would bring him face to face with one of the most terrifying creatures in all of Greek mythology, the Gorgon named Medusa. But before that journey could begin, Perseus would first have to face the ambitions of a king who believed he could manipulate fate. And once again, the forces surrounding Perseus would begin moving toward the destiny that had been waiting for him since the moment he entered the world. For many years, Perseus lived peacefully on the island of Seriphos. The boy who had once drifted helplessly across the sea had grown into a strong and capable young man. Far from the worries of his grandfather's kingdom, he knew little of prophecies, royal fears, or the destiny that had followed him since birth. To Perseus, life was simple. He knew the rhythm of the island. He knew the sound of waves breaking against the shore, the call of fishermen returning home, and the warmth of the sun reflecting off the blue waters surrounding Seriphos. He had been raised not as a prince, but as the son of Danae and the companion of Dictys, the kind fisherman who had welcomed them when they had nowhere else to go. But as Perseus grew older, he became a source of protection for his mother. Danae had spent years trying to create a safe life for her son, but she also understood the dangers of the world around them. She knew that not everyone possessed the kindness of Dictys. And soon, their peaceful existence would be threatened by someone who saw Danae not as a person, but as something to possess. That person was King Polydectes. Polydectes ruled Seriphos, and like many kings in ancient stories, he possessed both power and ambition. He lived in a position where people obeyed his commands, and over time, he became accustomed to getting whatever he desired. When he first saw Danae, he became determined to make her his wife. But there was a problem. Perseus stood between them. The young man loved and respected his mother deeply. He would not allow the king to pressure her or treat her without dignity. Though Polydectes was the ruler of the island, Perseus refused to be intimidated. The king quickly realized that removing Perseus from the island would make his desire much easier to achieve. But simply ordering him away would not be enough. Perseus was admired by many people, and forcing him into exile could create anger among the island's inhabitants. So Polydectes began searching for another way. He decided to use deception rather than force. The king announced that he was preparing to marry and requested gifts from the people of Seriphos. In ancient Greece, giving gifts to rulers and honored guests was an important tradition. Great celebrations often involved the exchange of valuable offerings, including animals, treasures, weapons, and other objects that displayed wealth and respect. Polydectes invited many people to bring him gifts. Eventually, he turned his attention toward Perseus. Knowing the young man's courage and pride, the king created a situation where Perseus would feel compelled to prove himself. During a gathering, the conversation turned toward heroic deeds and great accomplishments. The guests spoke about the things they would offer the king, and Polydectes asked Perseus what gift he would bring. Perseus had little wealth. He did not own treasures like a king. He had no armies or grand possessions. But he did possess something that mattered greatly in the eyes of the ancient Greeks. A hero was expected to keep his word even when the promise was difficult. Wanting to show that he was capable and brave, Perseus declared that he would bring back whatever gift the king desired. Polydectes saw his opportunity. He asked for something that seemed impossible, the head of Medusa. At that moment, the room would have fallen silent. Medusa was not an ordinary enemy. She was one of the 3 Gorgons, terrifying creatures said to live far beyond the familiar lands of Greece. She was known for her serpent-covered hair and her deadly ability to turn anyone who looked directly at her into stone. To face Medusa was considered a task beyond the ability of any ordinary person. Polydectes knew this. He believed he had sent Perseus on a journey from which he would never return. If Perseus died while attempting the impossible, the king would finally be free to pursue Danae without interference. And if, by some miracle, Perseus succeeded, Polydectes believed he would still benefit from the glory and power that came from such a remarkable achievement. The challenge had been given. The young man raised on a quiet island had been sent toward one of the darkest corners of the ancient world. But what Polydectes did not understand was that Perseus was not completely alone. The gods had been watching. The child born from prophecy, carried across the sea, and raised far from his original home had a destiny far greater than the king could imagine. The journey ahead would test every part of him. He would need courage to face terrifying creatures, wisdom to overcome impossible obstacles, and humility to accept help when it arrived. Because the path to Medusa was not a simple road. It would lead Perseus across distant lands, into forgotten places, and toward encounters with beings that existed only in the boundary between myth and reality. Before he could defeat the Gorgon, he would first need to find her. And finding Medusa was a challenge nearly as difficult as facing her. For the first time in his life, Perseus would leave the safety of Seriphos. He would step beyond the shores that had protected him since childhood. He would sail into the unknown. And somewhere beyond the horizon waited the adventure that would transform him from a young man into one of the greatest heroes of ancient Greece. The challenge had been given. Perseus, a young man from the quiet island of Seriphos, had promised to bring back the head of Medusa. To King Polydectes, the request was a clever way to remove an obstacle. He believed he had sent Perseus toward certain death. After all, Medusa was not a creature that ordinary warriors could defeat. She was one of the most feared beings in the ancient world. Her gaze could turn living creatures into stone. Her home was hidden far beyond familiar lands. Even reaching her island was considered nearly impossible. But Polydectes had underestimated one important thing. Perseus was not an ordinary young man. From the moment of his birth, his life had been touched by forces greater than himself. He was the child of Danae and, according to the myths, the son of Zeus. Though he had grown up away from palaces and armies, the gods had not forgotten him. And as Perseus prepared for his journey, two of the greatest Olympians took notice: Athena and Hermes. The ancient Greeks believed that the gods often became involved in the lives of mortals, especially those whose stories carried great importance. Heroes were not simply successful because they possessed strength. They succeeded because they had wisdom, courage, and sometimes the favor of divine powers. For Perseus, the help of the gods would be essential. A sword alone could not defeat Medusa. A shield alone could not protect him. A brave heart alone could not guide him through the unknown. He would need preparation. He would need knowledge. And he would need the gifts that only the gods could provide. The first to come to his aid was Athena. Among all the gods and goddesses of Greece, Athena held a unique place. She was the goddess of wisdom, strategy, and careful thought. Unlike warriors who rushed into battle with anger and pride, Athena represented the idea that intelligence could overcome even the greatest challenges. She was often shown wearing armor and carrying a shield, not because she sought conflict, but because she understood how to face danger with discipline and reason. Athena knew that Medusa could not be defeated through strength alone. Any warrior who approached the Gorgon and looked directly at her face would instantly become stone. A hero charging forward without a plan would never return. Perseus would need to think differently. He would need to fight without looking directly at his enemy. This lesson reflected one of the greatest ideas in Greek mythology. True heroism was not only about power. It was about understanding. It was about knowing when to act and when to wait. Alongside Athena came Hermes, the swift messenger of the gods. Hermes was known for his speed, cleverness, and ability to move between different worlds. He carried messages from Mount Olympus and guided travelers along their journeys. He was a protector of explorers, merchants, and those who crossed unfamiliar paths. For Perseus, who was about to travel beyond the edges of the known world, Hermes was the perfect guide. The two gods understood that Perseus would face dangers that could not be overcome by courage alone. Before he could ever reach Medusa, he would need to find the hidden location of the Gorgon's island. The path ahead would be filled with uncertainty. Ancient Greek myths often describe heroes receiving special objects before beginning their greatest adventures. These gifts were not simply weapons. They represented qualities that the hero needed to develop: strength, wisdom, patience, courage. Perseus would soon receive several remarkable gifts that would help him on his journey. From the gods and their allies, he would gain tools unlike anything possessed by ordinary mortals. There would be a sword capable of cutting through powerful enemies, a polished shield that would allow him to see without looking directly at danger, winged sandals that would carry him through the skies, and a special bag designed to hold the dangerous prize he sought. But before receiving these treasures, Perseus first needed to understand the task before him. The world beyond Seriphos was vast. The ancient Greeks imagined distant lands at the edges of their maps where strange creatures lived and mysteries waited. Beyond familiar islands and coastlines were places where sailors told stories of wonders and dangers. The journey to Medusa would take Perseus away from everything he knew. He would leave behind his mother, his home, and the peaceful island where he had grown up. For the first time, he would truly become a traveler, a hero, someone whose choices would shape not only his own fate but the fate of everyone connected to him. As Perseus prepared to depart, he carried with him the memory of Danae's struggles, the kindness of Dictys, and the hope that he would return safely. He did not know exactly what waited ahead. He did not know where Medusa's island could be found. He did not know the trials he would face along the way. But he did know one thing. He had given his word, and in the ancient world, a promise carried great weight. A hero was measured not only by the enemies he defeated, but by the promises he kept. With the guidance of Athena, the speed of Hermes, and the unseen protection of the gods, Perseus stepped forward into the unknown. The young man who had once been carried helplessly across the sea was now preparing to cross those same waters by choice. His adventure had begun, and somewhere far beyond the horizon, hidden among forgotten shores, the Gorgon Medusa waited. The journey of Perseus had begun. Leaving behind the familiar shores of Seriphos, the young hero entered a world far larger than anything he had known. The quiet island where he had grown up was now only a memory behind him, replaced by endless waters, distant horizons, and the uncertainty of what waited ahead. His mission was clear. He needed to find Medusa, but knowing the name of his enemy was not enough. The ancient Greeks believed that the world beyond their familiar lands was filled with hidden places, mysterious islands, and beings that existed somewhere between reality and legend. To find the Gorgon, Perseus would have to travel beyond ordinary maps and seek knowledge from creatures who guarded secrets known to almost no one. Before he could face Medusa, he needed to discover where she lived. And the first step of his journey would lead him to three ancient sisters known as the Grae. The Grae were among the oldest and strangest figures in Greek mythology. Their name meant the Gray Ones, and they were described as three sisters who had been born old. Unlike many creatures of mythology that represented physical strength or destruction, the Grae were mysterious figures associated with knowledge, age, and secrets. Their names were Dano, Inio, and Pemphredo. Together, they shared a remarkable and unusual feature. They had only one eye and one tooth between them. The three sisters would take turns using them, passing the single eye and tooth from one sister to another as they went about their existence. To ancient storytellers, the Grae represented something beyond simple monsters. They represented the idea of ancient knowledge, wisdom that had existed long before the world of humans. They lived in a distant and forgotten place, far from the lands where ordinary people traveled. Few knew their location, and even fewer knew how to approach them. For Perseus, finding the Grae was the first great test of his journey. He could not simply sail across the sea and expect to discover Medusa's home. He needed information. He needed patience. And he needed to use the same qualities that Athena valued most: intelligence and careful planning. As Perseus traveled farther from Greece, he entered landscapes that seemed almost untouched by human life. The shores became unfamiliar. The islands grew more distant. The waters stretched endlessly in every direction. At night, he would have looked upward at the stars that guided sailors across the Mediterranean. These same stars had watched over him when he was a child drifting in a wooden chest, and now they guided him by choice rather than by accident. The journey itself became a transformation. The abandoned infant who once had no control over his fate had become a traveler deciding his own path. Eventually, Perseus reached the place where the Grae lived. The ancient myths describe it as a dark and distant land, a place surrounded by mystery. It was not a welcoming kingdom with golden halls or crowded cities. It was a forgotten corner of the world, a place where secrets were protected. When Perseus approached the sisters, he knew that force would not help him. The Grae were not warriors. They were guardians of knowledge, and knowledge could not be taken with a sword. Instead, Perseus relied on cleverness. He watched carefully as the sisters passed their single eye between them. At the moment when one sister removed the eye to give it to another, Perseus moved quickly and took it for himself. Suddenly, the sisters were unable to see. The beings who had guarded their secrets for countless years were now vulnerable. Perseus had gained the advantage, but he did not use it to harm them. Instead, he made a bargain. He would return their eye if they revealed the information he needed. The sisters had no choice but to agree. They told Perseus where he could find the nymphs who possessed the magical items necessary for his quest. This moment revealed an important part of Perseus' character. He did not succeed because he was the strongest person in the world. He succeeded because he knew when strength was unnecessary. The challenge of Medusa would require the same wisdom. A warrior who rushed forward without thought would fail. But someone who understood the situation, observed carefully, and waited for the right moment could overcome even the greatest dangers. With the location of the nymphs now known, Perseus continued his journey. The Grae's secret had opened the path forward, but the road ahead was still long. Before he could stand before Medusa, Perseus would need the tools that would give him a chance of survival. He would need protection from her deadly gaze. He would need a way to reach her hidden island. And he would need weapons worthy of a hero favored by the gods. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the nymphs waited. Hidden away from ordinary mortals, they guarded treasures that had been placed there for a purpose. treasures that would allow Perseus to accomplish what seemed impossible. The defeat of Medusa. As Perseus left the Greece behind, the sea stretched before him once again. The journey continued, and with each passing day, the young hero moved closer to the greatest challenge of his life. A challenge that would test not only his courage, but his wisdom. Because before Perseus could defeat a monster, he first had to become the kind of hero who could face one. The path to Medusa was becoming clearer. After finding the Greece and discovering the location of the mysterious nymphs, Perseus continued his journey into the unknown corners of the ancient world. The young hero had already learned an important lesson. Courage alone was not enough. A warrior could carry the strongest sword and still fail if they lacked wisdom. A person could possess great strength and still fall if they did not understand the challenge before them. Perseus was beginning to realize that becoming a hero was not simply about defeating enemies. It was about preparation, it was about patience, and it was about knowing when to accept help. The gods had guided him this far, but the greatest challenges of his journey still waited ahead. Somewhere beyond the familiar lands of Greece were hidden treasures guarded by divine beings. These gifts were not ordinary objects. They were items connected to the gods themselves, created to help a mortal accomplish what should have been impossible. The Greece had revealed the location of the nymphs, and Perseus followed their instructions. His journey carried him farther across the sea and into places where few humans had ever traveled. The ancient Greeks imagined these distant regions as mysterious landscapes filled with wonders beyond ordinary understanding. The farther Perseus traveled, the more he entered a world where myth and reality blended together. Eventually, he found the nymphs. These divine beings were said to live in hidden places away from the sight of ordinary people. Unlike the great gods of Mount Olympus, who ruled over vast aspects of existence, nymphs were often connected to the natural world: forests, rivers, mountains, and springs. They represented the beauty and mystery of nature itself. The nymphs welcomed Perseus and provided him with the tools he would need to complete his impossible mission. The first gift was a pair of winged sandals. These magical sandals allowed Perseus to move through the air with incredible speed. In a world where travel depended on walking, sailing, and riding animals, the ability to fly represented freedom beyond the limits of ordinary humans. The sandals would allow him to cross great distances and escape dangers that no person on foot could survive. They were a reminder that Perseus' journey was not meant to be ordinary. He was stepping into a world where the impossible could become possible. The second gift was a special bag known as the kibisis. This was no ordinary container. The head of Medusa would be dangerous even after her defeat. Her gaze would remain powerful, and anyone who looked upon it could still be turned to stone. The bag would allow Perseus to safely carry his prize without exposing himself or others to its deadly power. The third gift was the cap of invisibility. This magical object, often associated with the god Hades, allowed its wearer to disappear from sight. For Perseus, this would become an invaluable tool. A hero does not always win by standing in the open and facing danger directly. Sometimes survival depends on knowing when to remain unseen. The ability to vanish would help Perseus escape enemies far stronger than himself. But perhaps the most important item Perseus received was not a weapon at all. It was the shield given to him by Athena. Unlike a normal shield designed to block attacks, Athena's shield had another purpose. Its surface was polished like a mirror. This detail would become the key to defeating Medusa, because the greatest danger of facing the Gorgon was not her strength. It was her gaze. Anyone who looked directly into Medusa's eyes would instantly become stone. A warrior with a sword could not simply charge forward. A hero with courage could not simply stare down the monster. The only way to survive was to avoid looking at her directly. The reflective shield would allow Perseus to see Medusa's movements through her reflection while keeping his own eyes safely away from hers. It was the perfect example of the kind of wisdom Athena represented. The solution was not overpowering the enemy. The solution was understanding the enemy. Perseus now possessed everything he needed: the sandals to travel, the bag to carry his prize, the cap to protect him, the shield to guide him, and the sword that would allow him to complete his task. But even with these gifts, Perseus still faced a terrifying challenge. The tools could help him survive. They could not remove his fear. They could not make the journey easy. They could not guarantee success. The young hero still had to step into the darkness himself. He still had to enter the home of Medusa. He still had to stand before one of the most feared creatures in all of mythology. The gods had given him the means to succeed, but Perseus would have to provide the courage. As he prepared to leave the nymphs behind, he carried more than magical objects. He carried the trust of those who had helped him. He carried the memory of his mother waiting for his return. And he carried the promise he had made on Seriphos. The promise to return with the head of Medusa. The final stage of his journey was approaching. Far away, beyond the edges of the known world, an island waited. A place of silence and shadows. A place where three sisters lived among stone figures that had once been living beings. And at the center of that island was the Gorgon herself, Medusa. Perseus now had the tools to find her. But soon, he would have to face the monster whose name had frightened generations of ancient Greeks. The greatest challenge of his life was drawing near. The final part of Perseus' journey was approaching. For many days, he had traveled across unfamiliar seas and distant lands. He had followed the guidance of the Gree, received the gifts of the nymphs, and prepared himself for the challenge ahead. Now, he was searching for a place that few mortals had ever seen. An island hidden beyond the edges of the known world. The home of the Gorgons. To the ancient Greeks, the world beyond their familiar shores was filled with mystery. Sailors told stories of strange lands where impossible creatures lived, where mountains touched the clouds, and where forgotten places existed beyond ordinary human experience. The island of the Gorgons belonged to this unknown world. It was not a place of beauty and celebration. It was a place of silence, a place where fear had taken root. The Gorgons were three sisters, Stheno, Euele, and Medusa. The first two were immortal beings, powerful and ancient. But Medusa was different. Unlike her sisters, Medusa had once been mortal. This detail made her story unlike many other monsters of Greek mythology. She was not simply a creature born from darkness. She had once been a person, and different versions of her story described different reasons for her transformation. In some traditions, Medusa was once a beautiful young woman who caught the attention of Poseidon. In the temple of Athena, she was transformed into a Gorgon after angering the goddess. Other versions tell the story differently, portraying Medusa's transformation as a punishment or a tragic change brought upon her by forces beyond her control. The ancient myths often contained many variations, passed down by different storytellers over many centuries. But in nearly every version, one thing remained the same. Medusa became one of the most feared figures in Greek mythology. She was described as having snakes instead of hair, sharp fangs, and a terrifying gaze that could instantly turn any living creature into stone. Her power was both simple and horrifying. One glance, that was all it took. a warrior with a sword, a sailor who discovered her island, a traveler who wandered too close. All could become lifeless statues in a single moment. The stories said that the island of the Gorgons was covered with the remains of those who had attempted to challenge them. Stone figures stood frozen across the landscape, silent reminders of the danger waiting there. For Perseus, this was the greatest test he had ever faced. But unlike many heroes who charged into danger with confidence and strength, Perseus understood the importance of caution. He had learned from Athena that wisdom was just as important as courage. Medusa's greatest weapon was not her claws or her strength. It was her ability to make others act without thinking. A warrior who looked directly at her would be defeated instantly. A person who rushed forward would never have a chance. The only way to survive was through patience and careful planning. As Perseus approached the island, he carried the gifts that would give him a chance. The winged sandals carried him silently through the air. The cap of invisibility protected him from being discovered. The magical bag waited to hold the dangerous prize. And the polished shield of Athena would become his most important tool. With the shield, Perseus would not need to look at Medusa herself. Instead, he would watch her reflection. A simple idea, a brilliant idea, a solution created not through greater strength, but through greater understanding. The island grew closer. The air became still. The waves moved gently against the shore. In the quiet landscape ahead, Perseus could see signs of the danger that awaited him. The remains of past travelers, the evidence of those who had failed. Each stone figure represented someone who had underestimated the Gorgon's power. But Perseus did not turn back. He had come too far. Behind him was the promise he had made. Behind him was his mother, Danae, waiting on Seriphos. Behind him was the life he had known. Ahead was the challenge that would define him forever. The hero slowly entered the island. Every step required care. Every movement had to be controlled. The slightest mistake could end his journey. The Gorgons slept nearby. According to the ancient stories, Perseus found them resting in their hidden dwelling. Their surroundings were dark and quiet, and the only sound was the distant movement of the sea. Medusa lay among her sisters, unaware that someone had finally reached her. But Perseus did not rush forward. He did not raise his sword immediately. He waited. He watched. He looked only at the reflection in Athena's shield. Through the shining surface, he saw the movements of the sleeping Gorgon without exposing himself to her deadly eyes. The moment had arrived. After a journey across unknown seas, after facing uncertainty and fear, Perseus finally stood before the creature he had been sent to defeat. The young man from Seriphos, the child carried away in a wooden chest, the son of Danae, the hero guided by the gods. Everything had led him to this moment. But the hardest part of his journey was not reaching Medusa. It was finding the courage to act. Because even with the gifts of the gods, even with the protection of Athena and Hermes, Perseus still had to make the choice himself. He had to step forward. He had to trust his training. And he had to face the monster whose name had frightened generations of Greeks. The island grew silent. The stars watched from above. And Perseus raised his sword. The island was silent. Beneath the dark sky, among the scattered stones and forgotten remains of those who had come before him, Perseus stood at the edge of the greatest challenge he had ever faced. Before him rested the sleeping Gorgon, Medusa. For years, her name had carried fear throughout the ancient world. Sailors whispered stories of her island. Warriors spoke of her deadly gaze. Travelers warned others never to seek the place where she lived. Many had attempted to face her. None had returned. But Perseus was different. He had not arrived with anger or arrogance. He had not come believing that strength alone would carry him to victory. He had come prepared. The lessons of his journey had led him to this moment. From the Greeks, he had learned the importance of knowledge. From the nymphs, he had received the tools needed for survival. From Athena, he had learned that wisdom could overcome dangers that power could not. Now, everything depended on whether he could put those lessons into practice. The sleeping Medusa lay before him. Even in rest, she appeared terrifying. The ancient stories described her hair as a mass of living serpents, twisting and moving around her head. Her face carried the power that had turned countless living beings into stone. Her very presence represented the danger of the unknown. But Perseus did not look directly at her. Instead, he watched her reflection in the polished surface of Athena's shield. The reflection showed him where she moved. It revealed her position without exposing him to her deadly eyes. Slowly, carefully, Perseus moved closer. Every step mattered. A single mistake would end everything. The island remained quiet. The waves moved gently along the shore. The wind passed through the empty landscape. And still, Medusa slept. The hero raised his sword. The weapon given to him by the gods was sharp enough to complete the task before him. But even now, Perseus hesitated for a moment. The creature before him was dangerous. But she was also a figure of tragedy. The myths of Medusa are complicated because she was not always portrayed as a monster. Beneath the terrifying image was a story of transformation and loss. She had once been human. She had once lived a different life. And now she had become one of the most feared beings in the world. This complexity was part of what made Greek mythology so enduring. The stories were not simply about good and evil. They were about change, about suffering, about the unpredictable forces that could shape a person's fate. But Perseus had a promise to keep. He had traveled across the sea. He had entered the unknown, and he had come too far to turn away. With Athena's guidance and the image reflected in the shield before him, Perseus struck. In a single moment, the impossible happened. Medusa was defeated. The monster who had terrified generations of Greeks fell silent. The danger was over. But the story of Medusa did not end there. The ancient myths tell that from her blood came two remarkable beings. The first was Pegasus, the magnificent winged horse who would become one of the most famous creatures in Greek mythology. The second was Chrysaor, a powerful figure whose name was associated with golden weapons and greatness. Even in death, Medusa's story continued. From a creature feared by all came symbols of beauty, power, and imagination. This was another theme often found in Greek mythology. Something unexpected could emerge from tragedy. Something beautiful could come from something frightening. Perseus carefully followed the instructions he had been given. He did not look directly at Medusa. Instead, he placed her head safely into the magical bag provided by the nymphs. The dangerous power remained, but it was now contained. The task that seemed impossible had been completed. The young man from Seriphos had accomplished what many warriors could never have done. He had defeated the Gorgon. But there was no time for celebration. The island of the Gorgons was still dangerous. Medusa's sisters, Stheno and Euryale, were nearby. Unlike Medusa, they were immortal, and they would not forgive the one who had taken their sister's life. Perseus had to leave quickly. Using the cap of invisibility, he escaped their notice. The winged sandals carried him away from the island, lifting him above the dangerous shores and into the open sky. Below him, the island grew smaller. The place that had once seemed impossible to reach was now behind him. Perseus looked toward the horizon. For the first time since beginning his journey, he carried proof that he had succeeded. The head of Medusa was no longer a symbol of fear. It had become a symbol of his courage and determination. But his adventure was far from over. The journey home would bring new challenges. The ancient world was still vast, and the seas still held mysteries. As Perseus traveled across distant lands with his magical gifts, he would encounter kingdoms, creatures, and people who needed his help. The hero who left Seriphos seeking to complete an impossible task had become something greater. He had become a protector, a traveler, a figure whose name would be remembered for thousands of years. And as the island of the Gorgons disappeared behind him, Perseus continued onward. The monster had fallen, but the legend was only beginning. The island of the Gorgons slowly disappeared behind Perseus. The place that had once seemed like an impossible destination was now only a distant shape beneath the horizon. The dark shores, the silent forests, and the terrifying home of Medusa faded into the vastness of the sea. Perseus had accomplished what few could have imagined. He had entered the lair of the Gorgons. He had faced Medusa, and he had returned alive. But the journey was not over. A hero's path rarely ended with a single victory. The ancient Greeks understood that great challenges often led to new ones. Success brought responsibility, and the choices made after victory could be just as important as the battle itself. Now Perseus traveled across the ancient world carrying a prize unlike any other. Hidden safely within the magical bag was the head of Medusa. Even after her defeat, the power of the Gorgon remained. Her gaze still possessed the ability to turn living creatures into stone, making the object both a weapon and a danger. Perseus had completed the task given to him by King Polydectes. But he knew that such a powerful object could not be treated carelessly. The young hero continued his journey through lands that existed beyond the familiar world of Greece. With the help of the winged sandals, he moved above the earth and sea, traveling farther than any ordinary person could. Below him stretched landscapes of incredible variety. Mountain ranges rose like waves of stone. Rivers wound through valleys and forests. Ancient cities stood along coastlines where merchants, sailors, and travelers gathered. The Mediterranean world was a place of constant movement. Ships crossed the waters carrying olive oil, wine, pottery, metals, and stories. Every island had its own traditions, and every shore held the possibility of encountering something new. For Perseus, the journey home became a journey of discovery. He was no longer simply a young man from a small island. He had entered the world of legends. The gifts of the gods allowed him to travel quickly, but the ancient stories often focused less on the distance he traveled and more on the encounters he experienced along the way. Because in Greek mythology, journeys were rarely only about reaching a destination. They were about transformation. Every challenge revealed something about the hero. Every meeting offered a lesson. Every difficult choice shaped the person they would become. As Perseus crossed the skies, he carried with him the memory of everything he had experienced. He remembered the moment he first learned of his impossible task. He remembered the quiet kindness of those who helped him. He remembered the wisdom of Athena and the guidance of Hermes. And he remembered the island where he had faced Medusa alone. The young man who left Seriphos had changed. He had learned that courage was not the absence of fear. Even heroes could be afraid. Courage was continuing forward despite uncertainty. The ancient Greeks admired this quality deeply. Their heroes were not always fearless figures who easily defeated every enemy. Instead, they were individuals who faced impossible circumstances and found the strength to continue. Perseus represented this idea. He was not successful because he was the strongest warrior. He succeeded because he listened, learned, and adapted. But as he traveled, Perseus also carried the weight of what he had done. The story of Medusa was not simply a tale of defeating a monster. It was a reminder that mythology often contains sadness alongside triumph. Medusa's story was tragic. She had once been human. She had once lived a different life. And now her image would forever be remembered as one of fear and power. The myths of Greece often carried these complicated emotions. Heroes could achieve great things, but their victories were rarely simple. The world they lived in was filled with choices that had consequences. As Perseus continued across the ancient landscape, fate slowly guided him toward another kingdom. A kingdom facing a terrible problem. There, he would meet someone whose story would become forever connected with his own. A princess named Andromeda. But before that meeting, Perseus traveled through quiet lands beneath endless skies. He passed over shores where fishermen pulled their boats from the water. He crossed valleys where farmers worked beneath the sun. He moved above ancient roads where travelers walked between distant cities. The world below continued as it always had. People lived their ordinary lives. They planted crops. They built homes. They raised families. They watched the stars at night and wondered about the mysteries of the world around them. And above them traveled a hero from legend. A man who had crossed the boundaries between the ordinary and the divine. A man who had faced a creature that turned living beings into stone. A man who carried a piece of mythology with him wherever he went. Yet despite his achievements, Perseus' greatest adventures were still ahead. The gods had guided him toward Medusa. Now fate was leading him toward a new challenge. Far away, on the shores of another kingdom, a young woman waited for rescue. A terrible creature threatened the land, and a hero carrying the power of the Gorgon's gaze was about to arrive. The journey of Perseus continued. The monster had been defeated, but the legend was still being written. The journey of Perseus carried him far from the island where he had grown up. He had crossed dangerous waters, entered forgotten lands, and faced one of the most terrifying creatures in all of Greek mythology. The defeat of Medusa had transformed him from a young man seeking to complete a task into a hero whose name would be remembered for generations. But the ancient world was vast. The Mediterranean was filled with kingdoms, islands, and people whose stories had not yet crossed paths with his own. And somewhere along those distant shores, another story was unfolding. A story of a princess, a kingdom, and a terrible threat rising from the sea. As Perseus traveled above the earth with his winged sandals, he eventually came to the land of Ethiopia. In Greek mythology, Ethiopia was often described as a distant and remarkable kingdom located far beyond the familiar Greek world. Ancient writers imagined it as a place of great beauty, wealth, and mystery. It was ruled by King Seriphos and Queen Cassiopeia. Like many royal families in Greek myths, they lived in a world where the actions of individuals could affect entire kingdoms. The choices of kings and queens were not only personal decisions, they could bring blessings or disasters upon everyone they ruled. Queen Cassiopeia was known throughout the land for her beauty. But beauty, in the stories of ancient Greece, was often accompanied by danger. The myths frequently warned that pride could lead even the most powerful people into trouble. A person who believed too strongly in their own greatness might forget the importance of humility. According to the legend, Cassiopeia made a boast that angered the gods. She claimed that she and her daughter, Princess Andromeda, were more beautiful than the sea nymphs known as the Nereids. The Nereids were beloved companions of Poseidon, the god of the sea. They represented the beauty and mystery of the ocean, and insulting them was considered a serious offense. When word of Cassiopeia's pride reached Poseidon, the god became furious. The sea, which had provided life and prosperity to countless civilizations, could also become a source of destruction. Storms rose. The waters became dangerous, and a terrible creature was sent from the depths of the ocean to punish the kingdom. The people of the land lived in fear. Their fishing boats could no longer travel safely. Their shores were threatened. The peaceful rhythm of daily life had been interrupted by something beyond human control. In desperation, King Seriphos sought answers. Like many rulers in ancient stories, he turned to prophecy. He needed to know why this disaster had come and what could be done to save his kingdom. The answer was heartbreaking. The oracle revealed that the only way to end the suffering was to sacrifice Andromeda. The princess would be offered to the sea monster as a way of restoring peace. For King Seriphos and Queen Cassiopeia, the choice was devastating. Their daughter was innocent. She had done nothing to cause the anger of the gods. Yet the people believed that the fate of the entire kingdom depended on this sacrifice. And so Andromeda was taken to the coast. There, she was chained to a rock overlooking the sea. The image became one of the most famous scenes in Greek mythology. A young princess standing alone beside the waves. The ocean stretching endlessly before her. A terrible creature waiting beneath the surface. The story carried many of the themes that appeared throughout ancient myths. The power of nature, the consequences of pride, the vulnerability of humans before forces greater than themselves, and the hope that a hero might arrive when all seemed lost. As Andromeda waited on the shore, she could not have known that someone was approaching. High above the earth, Perseus was traveling through the sky. He had no reason to expect another adventure. He had already completed the challenge given to him by Polydectes. He was carrying the proof of his victory and was simply passing through another distant land. But fate had other plans. The ancient Greeks often believed that people were connected by forces they could not see. A single journey could bring strangers together. A single moment could change the course of many lives. Perseus looked down and saw something unusual along the coastline. A figure standing alone against the sea. As he moved closer, he saw a young woman bound to the rocks. It was Andromeda, the princess of Ethiopia. The hero who had defeated Medusa had discovered a new challenge waiting for him. But this time, he was not fighting for a promise made to a king. He was not seeking glory or reward. He was about to help someone simply because it was the right thing to do. Perseus descended toward the shore. And as he approached Andromeda, a new chapter of his legend began. The monster he would face next would not hide on a distant island. It would rise from the depths of the sea itself. And once again, Perseus would have to prove that a true hero was not defined only by the enemies he defeated. A true hero was defined by the people he chose to protect. The coastline was quiet. The waves moved gently beneath the warm Mediterranean sun, but beneath that peaceful surface waited something terrible. Far out in the water, a creature stirred, a monster from the depths of the sea. And on the shore, bound to the rocks, stood Princess Andromeda. She had been chosen as a sacrifice to save her kingdom. Her parents had been forced into an impossible decision, and now the young princess waited alone, knowing that the fate of an entire land rested upon her shoulders. She had done nothing wrong. She had not summoned the creature. She had not angered the gods. Yet she had become the price demanded to restore peace. Andromeda watched the sea, waiting for the end. But she was not alone. High above the coastline, Perseus traveled through the sky. The hero who had defeated Medusa was continuing his journey, carrying the magical tools gifted by the gods and the memory of the impossible challenge he had already overcome. When he looked down and saw Andromeda chained to the rocks, he immediately recognized that something was wrong. Here was someone in danger, and for Perseus, that was enough. He descended toward the shore and approached the princess. At first, Andromeda must have seemed like a mysterious figure. She was dressed as royalty, yet she stood in a place where no princess should ever have been. Perseus asked what had happened. Andromeda told him the story of her kingdom's suffering. She explained the pride of her mother, the anger of Poseidon, and the terrible creature that had been sent from the sea. She told him that the monster would soon arrive. But even knowing the danger, Perseus did not leave. But there was something different about this moment. When Perseus faced Medusa, he was fulfilling a promise. When he faced the sea monster, he was choosing to help someone who needed him. This was the moment when Perseus truly became a hero. Not because he had defeated a monster, not because he possessed magical weapons, but because he used his abilities to protect another person. Perseus approached King Seriphos and Queen Cassiopeia and offered to save Andromeda. The king and queen were desperate. They promised Perseus great rewards if he succeeded, including their daughter's hand in marriage. The hero agreed, but the challenge before him would be unlike anything he had faced before. Medusa had been defeated through patience and strategy. The sea monster would require speed, courage, and skill. The creature soon appeared. The waters began to move. The calm surface of the sea transformed into waves as something enormous approached from below. Ancient Greek stories often described sea monsters as symbols of the unknown power of nature. The ocean provided food, transportation, and life, but it could also bring storms, destruction, and danger. To sailors who crossed these waters thousands of years ago, the sea represented both opportunity and fear. From beneath the waves emerged the monster. Its size was enormous. Its appearance was terrifying. It had been sent as a punishment, and it came toward the shore with unstoppable force. But Perseus was ready. The gifts of the gods had prepared him for this moment. With the winged sandals, he moved quickly through the air, avoiding the creature's attacks. The battle unfolded between sky and sea. The monster struck at the waves below. Perseus moved above it, searching for the right moment to attack. Unlike his battle with Medusa, there was no need to avoid a deadly gaze. This was a different kind of challenge. The hero needed to rely on speed, courage, and careful timing. As the creature rose from the water, Perseus saw his opportunity. He moved swiftly. The battle was fierce, but the hero who had defeated the Gorgon was not the same person who had left Seriphos. He had gained experience. He had learned confidence, and he understood what it meant to face danger. Eventually, the sea monster was defeated. The threat that had haunted the kingdom was gone. The people of the land were safe. Andromeda was freed from the rocks where she had waited for her fate. The kingdom celebrated. A disaster that had seemed unavoidable had been prevented by a traveler who arrived at exactly the right moment. The story of Perseus and Andromeda became one of the most famous romances in Greek mythology. But beyond the romance was something deeper. Their meeting showed how unexpected paths could cross. Perseus had not planned to find Andromeda. He had not been searching for another adventure. Yet because he chose to stop and help, his story became connected with hers forever. The ancient Greeks often believed that destiny worked in mysterious ways. A person could travel across the world seeking one goal and discover another purpose along the way. Perseus had left Seriphos to defeat Medusa. But his journey had transformed him into something greater. He had become someone who protected others, someone whose courage brought hope to people who had lost it. As the sun set over the coastline, the kingdom of Ethiopia celebrated its rescue. The waves grew calm once again. The danger had passed. And beneath the evening sky, Perseus stood beside Andromeda, unaware that his greatest adventures were still not finished. Because heroes in ancient stories were rarely allowed to return home without facing one final challenge. And waiting for Perseus across the sea was the kingdom of Seriphos, the place where his journey had begun, the place where a king who thought he had sent him to his death was waiting, and the place where Perseus would soon discover that the past he had left behind was not finished with him. The rescue of Andromeda had brought Perseus great honor. The kingdom of Ethiopia had been saved. The sea monster that had threatened the land was gone, and the people who had lived in fear could finally return to their ordinary lives. But for Perseus, the journey was not finished. Beyond the celebrations and gratitude of the kingdom, another destination waited: Seriphos, the island where his story had begun. The place where his mother Danae had found refuge after being cast away by her own father. The place where a fisherman named Dictys had shown them kindness. And the place where King Polydectes still ruled. For a long time, Perseus had been far away from home. He had left as a young man carrying a promise and uncertainty. Now he returned as a hero whose name had begun spreading across the ancient world. But he did not know what had happened while he was gone. He did not know how much life on Seriphos had changed. And most importantly, he did not know what King Polydectes had done in his absence. While Perseus traveled across distant lands, Polydectes had continued pursuing Danae. The king had not forgotten his desire to marry her. In fact, with Perseus gone, he believed the obstacle standing between them had finally disappeared. For years, Polydectes had viewed Perseus as a problem. The young man was loyal to his mother. He challenged the king's authority. He refused to allow Danae to be treated as something that could simply be claimed. Sending Perseus after Medusa had been Polydectes' solution. The king believed that the mission was impossible. He expected Perseus never to return. But fate had once again refused to follow the plans of a powerful ruler. Perseus was coming home. As the hero approached Seriphos, he carried with him the experiences of his incredible journey. He had crossed dangerous seas. He had received gifts from the gods. He had defeated Medusa. He had rescued Andromeda. The young man who once lived quietly on the island was no longer the same person. He had discovered his own courage. He had learned the value of wisdom. And he had become someone capable of facing challenges far beyond ordinary human ability. When Perseus finally reached Seriphos, he was welcomed with surprise. News of his adventures had traveled across the ancient world, but stories often become larger as they move from one person to another. Some people may have believed them, others may have doubted them. But when Perseus returned carrying proof of his victory, there could be no question. The hero had succeeded. He had done what Polydectes believed impossible. He had defeated Medusa. Yet the reunion with his old home was not a peaceful one. Perseus soon discovered that his mother was no longer living freely. According to the myths, Danae had sought protection from the unwanted attention of Polydectes and had taken refuge in a temple. The king had used his power to pressure her, believing that no one remained who could oppose him. But now Perseus had returned. And he was not returning as the helpless child who had once been carried away in a wooden chest. He was returning as a hero. Perseus entered the presence of Polydectes and his followers. The king was likely shocked. The task he had created to destroy Perseus had instead transformed him into someone far more powerful. But Polydectes was not a man who easily admitted defeat. He had spent years believing he controlled the situation. He had believed that his position as king made him untouchable. He did not understand that true power was not only found in a throne. It was found in character, in courage, and in the respect earned from others. Perseus still carried the head of Medusa. The object that had defeated the Gorgon remained one of the most powerful weapons in the ancient world. The hero now faced a choice. He could use this power for revenge. He could punish those who had wronged him, or he could act with the wisdom he had gained during his journey. This was another important theme in Greek mythology. The greatest heroes were not measured only by their victories. They were measured by how they used their power afterward. A person could defeat a monster and still become cruel. A warrior could win every battle and still fail to become a true hero. The challenge after gaining power was learning how to use it responsibly. Perseus had learned from Athena that wisdom mattered as much as strength. And now he would have the chance to prove it. The people of Seriphos gathered. The king stood before them, and the hero who had returned from the edges of the world prepared to reveal what he had accomplished. The story that began with a prophecy and a fearful king had now come full circle. The child who was supposed to bring about his grandfather's downfall had survived abandonment. The young man who was sent away to die had returned victorious, and the hero who carried the power to turn living beings into stone was about to decide the fate of the king who had tried to remove him forever. The final confrontation on Seriphos was about to begin, and once again, Perseus would have to choose what kind of hero he wanted to be. The great hall of Seriphos was filled with uncertainty. The people of the island had gathered to witness the return of Perseus, the young man who had left years before on what many believed to be an impossible mission. When he departed, he had been seen as a reckless young man sent away by a powerful king. Now he had returned as a hero. Stories of his adventures had traveled far beyond the shores of Seriphos. But those stories had seemed impossible, until Perseus stood before them. The hero carried with him proof of everything he had accomplished. And among the treasures he brought back was the most powerful and dangerous object of all, the head of Medusa. King Polydectes watched as Perseus entered. The king had expected a different sight. He had expected a defeated young man who had failed in his mission. He had expected never to see Perseus again. Instead, the person standing before him was confident, respected, and surrounded by people who admired him. The plan that Polydectes had created to remove Perseus had completely failed. The king had believed that sending someone after Medusa was a way to guarantee their destruction. But he had unknowingly created the journey that transformed Perseus into a legend. Still, Polydectes refused to accept that he had lost. Pride was a dangerous thing in the ancient Greek myths. Again and again, stories warned that those who allowed arrogance to control them often brought about their own downfall. Kings who believed they were above consequences. Warriors who believed they were unbeatable. Rulers who believed power meant they could do anything. Polydectes had fallen into the same trap. He had power, he had wealth, he had a throne, but he lacked the qualities that made a true leader: humility, compassion, wisdom. When Perseus presented himself before the king, Polydectes attempted to dismiss his accomplishment. Perhaps he believed the stories were exaggerated. Perhaps he believed Perseus had somehow tricked others. Or perhaps he simply could not accept that someone he considered insignificant had achieved something greater than he ever could. But Perseus did not need to argue. He did not need to prove himself with words. He had brought back the evidence of his victory. The head of Medusa remained hidden within the magical bag. And now, the power that Polydectes had underestimated would determine his fate. According to the myth, when Polydectes continued to challenge Perseus and refused to believe his accomplishment, the hero revealed the head of Medusa. But he did not look directly at it. He understood the danger. Instead, he used the reflection of the Gorgon's gaze. In an instant, the king's arrogance came to an end. Polydectes was transformed into stone. The ruler who had attempted to control the lives of others was frozen forever. The people of Seriphos were finally free from his rule. The story of Polydectes serves as one of the clearest lessons in Perseus' legend. Power without kindness becomes dangerous. Ambition without wisdom leads to destruction. And those who attempt to manipulate fate often find themselves trapped by their own actions. But Perseus' return was not only about defeating an enemy. It was also about restoring what had been lost. After Polydectes was gone, Perseus ensured that the throne of Seriphos passed to someone worthy. According to some versions of the story, he gave the kingdom to Dictys, the fisherman who had rescued Danae and Perseus when they first arrived on the island. This was a fitting reward. Years earlier, when Danae and her infant son had been abandoned at sea, Dictys had offered them kindness without expecting anything in return. He had given them shelter when they had nothing. Now, after all the years that had passed, Perseus returned that kindness. The humble fisherman became a king. And the person who had shown compassion when no one else did was finally rewarded. Danae was free as well. The years of fear and uncertainty were behind her. The woman who had once been locked away by her father, cast into the sea, and threatened by a powerful king had survived every hardship placed before her. Her son had grown from a helpless child into a legendary hero. The prophecy that had caused so much fear had come true in a way that no one expected. But there was still one person connected to that prophecy: Perseus, the grandfather who had tried to prevent his own fate. The king who had believed he could escape destiny by abandoning his daughter and grandson. Perseus had not forgotten his origins. He now knew that his story had begun long before he ever reached Seriphos. He knew that somewhere across the sea was the kingdom of Argos, the kingdom of his birth, the kingdom of the grandfather who had feared him before he had even entered the world. And eventually, Perseus would return there. The prophecy that had shaped so many lives was still waiting to be completed. Because even though Perseus had defeated monsters and rescued kingdoms, one question remained. Could anyone truly escape fate? The ancient Greeks believed that destiny was a powerful force. Kings could build walls. They could hide children away. They could send people across oceans. But sometimes, the very actions taken to avoid fate were the actions that brought it closer. And now, after years of adventure, Perseus was finally approaching the moment that had been foretold before his birth. The moment when he would meet his grandfather. The moment when the prophecy of Perseus would be fulfilled. The journey that began with fear was moving toward its final chapter. The story of Perseus had always been connected to a prophecy. Before he was born, his future had already been spoken. King Perseus of Argos had been warned that his daughter's son would one day cause his death. The prophecy had filled him with fear. Rather than accepting the uncertainty of the future, Perseus tried to fight against it. He locked Danae away. He built walls around her. He attempted to prevent the possibility of a child being born. And when Perseus finally entered the world, he sent his own daughter and grandson away in the hope that the sea would solve the problem for him. But every choice Perseus made only moved him closer to the fate he feared. This was one of the greatest themes in ancient Greek mythology. the idea that destiny could not always be avoided. The gods could reveal what was coming, but humans often had little power to change it. A person's attempts to escape fate could become the very actions that fulfilled it. Years had passed since Acrisius had cast Danae and Perseus away. The king had continued ruling Argos, perhaps believing that he had succeeded. Perhaps he thought the prophecy had disappeared with the waves that carried the wooden chest away. But far across the sea, the child he feared had grown into a hero. And now Perseus was returning to the land of his birth. After leaving Seriphos, Perseus traveled through the ancient world, carrying with him the reputation he had earned through his adventures. He was no longer simply the unknown son of Danae. He was the hero who had defeated Medusa, the warrior who had rescued Andromeda, the man favored by the gods. Eventually, his journey brought him toward Argos, the kingdom where his story had begun, the land where his grandfather still ruled. But Perseus did not return seeking revenge. Unlike Polydectes, who had used power selfishly, Perseus had learned restraint. He understood that strength was not measured by how easily someone could punish their enemies. It was measured by how wisely they used their power. When Perseus arrived near Argos, he did not know exactly what awaited him. He did not know whether Acrisius would welcome him. He did not know whether his grandfather still feared the prophecy. And he did not know that fate was already moving toward its final moment. The ancient stories tell that Acrisius eventually learned that Perseus was alive. The news must have been frightening. The child he had tried to prevent had survived. The prophecy he had spent his life avoiding had returned. But this time, there was no wooden chest to send away. No walls to hide behind. No distance large enough to separate Acrisius from the destiny he feared. Yet the fulfillment of the prophecy would not happen through anger or violence. Perseus did not arrive in Argos planning to kill his grandfather. The event that completed the prophecy came through accident, and that made the story even more tragic. In ancient Greek tales, fate was often portrayed as something that could arrive unexpectedly. A person could spend years preparing for a great battle and still be defeated by something simple. A person could avoid one danger only to encounter another. Life could change in a single moment. According to the myth, Perseus eventually took part in athletic games. The Greeks valued these competitions greatly. Events of strength, skill, and endurance brought people together from different regions, and victories were celebrated as signs of excellence. During one of these games, Perseus competed in the discus throw. The discus was a heavy circular object thrown for distance, requiring both strength and precision. Perseus prepared to make his throw. He gathered his strength. He released the discus. But the throw went wrong. The discus traveled farther than expected and struck an older man among the spectators. That man was Acrisius, the king of Argos, the grandfather who had tried so desperately to escape the prophecy. And in that single moment, the prophecy was fulfilled. Acrisius died not by a weapon, not by a battle, and not by an act of revenge. He died because of an accident, because of the very grandson he had feared. The story is one of the most powerful examples of the Greek belief in fate. Acrisius had tried everything possible to prevent the future, but his fear had caused him to make choices that shaped the very events he wanted to avoid. If he had never imprisoned Danae, perhaps Perseus would never have been born in the way he was. If he had never sent Perseus away, perhaps their paths would have been different. His attempt to control destiny had become part of destiny itself. After Acrisius' death, Perseus faced a difficult reality. He had fulfilled the prophecy, but not in the way anyone expected. He had not wanted his grandfather to die. He had not sought revenge. Yet the consequences of fate had arrived anyway. The kingdom of Argos was now connected to him. The throne that Acrisius had held was now within Perseus' reach. But the hero did not simply take power. Instead, he considered what was right. The young man who had once been abandoned by a king had become someone capable of leading with wisdom. His story had traveled from a locked chamber in Argos, across the open sea, through battles with monsters, and finally back to the place where everything began. The prophecy was complete, but the life of Perseus was not over. The hero still had choices to make. He still had a legacy to build. And the next chapter of his story would reveal how he would shape the world after fulfilling the destiny that had followed him since birth. The prophecy had been fulfilled. The words spoken before Perseus' birth had followed him through every stage of his life. King Acrisius had spent his life trying to escape fate. But in the end, fate arrived exactly as the prophecy had foretold. Perseus had returned to Argos, and the grandfather who had once feared him was gone. Yet the hero did not celebrate. He did not see himself as someone who had conquered an enemy. He had not wanted Acrisius' death. Instead, he carried the complicated emotions of someone who had lost a family member under tragic circumstances. This was one of the qualities that separated Perseus from many figures in ancient mythology. He was powerful, but he was not ruled by power. He had defeated monsters, but he did not become cruel. After the death of Acrisius, Perseus faced a difficult question. What should happen next? The throne of Argos was now connected to him. By birth, he had a claim to the kingdom. He was the son of Danae, the daughter of the former king. But Perseus' journey had taught him that a crown was not simply a symbol of authority. A ruler carried responsibility. A king's actions affected countless lives. The ancient Greeks often portrayed leadership as a test of character. Perseus had spent his life experiencing both the kindness and cruelty of those with power. He remembered Acrisius, whose fear led him to imprison his own daughter. He remembered Polydectes, whose desire caused him to manipulate and threaten others. But he also remembered Dictys, the fisherman who offered help without expecting anything in return. These experiences shaped the kind of person Perseus would become. He understood that true greatness was not measured by wealth, armies, or titles. It was measured by how someone treated others. According to some versions of the myth, Perseus eventually exchanged kingdoms with another ruler named Megapenthes. Rather than taking the throne of Argos, he became connected with another land and continued building his own legacy. The details of his later life vary among ancient storytellers, as many Greek myths were passed down through generations and changed over time. But the central idea remained the same. Perseus was remembered not simply as a king. He was remembered as a hero. The ancient Greeks believed that extraordinary individuals could become part of the stars themselves. The night sky was filled with stories. Constellations served as reminders of heroes, creatures, and legends that had shaped the world. And Perseus was among those honored in the heavens. The constellation bearing his name has been recognized for thousands of years. Ancient observers looked upward and saw the outline of the hero who defeated Medusa, carrying the memory of his adventures across the endless sky. Nearby were other figures connected to his story: Andromeda, Cassiopeia, Seriphos, even the sea monster he defeated. Together, they formed a celestial reminder of a tale that blended courage, tragedy, love, and destiny. But perhaps the most lasting part of Perseus' story was not the monsters he defeated. It was the journey that transformed him. At the beginning of his life, Perseus was powerless. He was a child whose fate was decided by others. His grandfather feared him. His mother was imprisoned. His future seemed controlled by forces beyond his understanding. Yet through every hardship, Perseus continued forward. The sea that carried him away became the sea he crossed by choice. The abandonment that threatened to end his story became the beginning of his adventure. The impossible challenge meant to destroy him became the accomplishment that made him legendary. This pattern appears throughout many ancient myths. Heroes are not born complete. They become heroes through their experiences. They learn through failure. They grow through hardship. They discover who they are when faced with challenges they never expected. Perseus' story also carried another important lesson. The greatest victories are not always achieved through strength alone. Medusa was not defeated because Perseus was stronger than her. She was defeated because he was wise enough to understand her weakness. The sea monster was not defeated because Perseus was fearless. It was defeated because he chose to help someone in need. The challenges of his life were overcome because he combined courage with compassion. Thousands of years later, the story of Perseus continues to capture the imagination because it reflects questions that humans have always asked. Can we escape the circumstances of our birth? Can we choose who we become? Can kindness survive in a world filled with danger? Can one person's choices change the future? The myth of Perseus suggests that the answer to these questions is yes. A person may not control everything that happens to them. They may face struggles they never expected. They may encounter challenges that seem impossible. But they can choose how they respond. They can choose courage over fear, wisdom over arrogance, compassion over cruelty. That is why Perseus remained one of the most celebrated heroes of ancient Greece. Not because he was perfect, not because his journey was easy, but because he faced a world filled with uncertainty and continued moving forward. From a hidden chamber in Argos to the distant corners of the ancient world, his life became a story of transformation, a story of destiny, a story of a child who survived the sea, a hero who defeated monsters, and a man who discovered that the greatest victories were not always over enemies. Sometimes, the greatest victories were over fear itself. For thousands of years, the story of Perseus has traveled across the world. It has been told beside ancient fires, written on scrolls, carved into pottery, painted by artists, and passed from one generation to the next. The names may have changed slightly. The details may have shifted. Different storytellers may have focused on different parts of the adventure. But the heart of the story remained the same. A young man born into uncertainty became a hero. A child abandoned by fate discovered his own purpose. A person who began with nothing became someone remembered forever. The story of Perseus survived because it was never only about monsters and magic. It was about the challenges that every person faces. The fear of the unknown, the desire to find meaning, the struggle between destiny and choice, and the hope that even an ordinary person can rise to meet extraordinary circumstances. Ancient Greek myths were not simply entertainment. They were ways of exploring the world and understanding human nature. The Greeks looked at the storms of the sea, the changing seasons, the mysteries of life, and the struggles of people around them, and they created stories that reflected those experiences. Heroes became symbols of the qualities people admired most: strength, courage, wisdom. But Greek heroes were rarely perfect. They made mistakes. They experienced loss. They faced difficult choices. That was part of what made their stories meaningful. Perseus was not remembered because his life was easy. His life began with hardship. Before he ever held a sword or stood before a monster, he experienced uncertainty. His grandfather feared a prophecy and tried to prevent his existence. His mother, Dani, was imprisoned and treated unfairly. As an infant, Perseus was placed into a wooden chest and cast into the sea. Yet this beginning did not define him. Instead, it became the first chapter of a much larger journey. The sea that carried him away became the same sea he later crossed as a hero. The danger that surrounded his birth became the foundation of his legend. This was one of the most powerful ideas in his story. A person's beginning does not determine their ending. Perseus also represented the Greek belief that wisdom was just as important as strength. Many ancient heroes were powerful warriors, but Perseus succeeded because he understood that courage without thought could lead to disaster. He did not defeat Medusa by overpowering her. He defeated her by understanding her. He listened to Athena's advice. He used the tools he was given. He waited for the right moment. The victory belonged not only to his sword, but to his ability to think. This lesson remained important throughout Greek storytelling. The greatest heroes were not simply those who could fight. They were those who could overcome challenges through intelligence and character. The story of Medusa itself became one of the most enduring parts of Greek mythology. Her image appeared throughout ancient art, from pottery to sculptures and decorations on shields. The terrifying face of the Gorgon became a symbol of protection and power. Greek warriors sometimes placed images of Medusa on their armor because they believed her frightening appearance could protect them from danger. Over time, Medusa's story also became one of the most discussed myths because of its complexity. She was remembered as a monster, but many versions of her story also portrayed her as a tragic figure. She represented the idea that stories are rarely simple. People can be both powerful and vulnerable. A person can be feared and still have suffered. Even the creatures of mythology often carried deeper meanings. The sea monster defeated by Perseus represented the dangers that humans faced when confronted by forces beyond their control. Andromeda's rescue represented hope arriving in moments of despair. The downfall of Polydectes represented the dangers of arrogance and selfish ambition. The prophecy of Perseus represented the ancient Greek belief that fate could not easily be escaped. Each part of Perseus' journey carried a lesson, and perhaps that is why the story continued to survive. Every generation found something different within it. Some saw a tale of adventure. Some saw a story about family. Some saw a warning about pride. Some saw a reminder that courage could be found in unexpected places. Even today, the name Perseus remains familiar. The constellation named after him still shines in the night sky. The stories connected to him continue to inspire books, paintings, films, and new interpretations. The hero who once existed only in the imagination of ancient storytellers became a permanent part of human culture. When people look toward the stars and see the constellation of Perseus, they are seeing more than a pattern of distant lights. They are seeing a reminder of a story that has lasted thousands of years. A story about a child who survived impossible circumstances. A young man who faced fears greater than himself. A hero who learned that true strength came not only from power, but from wisdom and compassion. The world of ancient Greece is long gone. The temples have become ruins. The kingdoms have disappeared. The ships that crossed the Mediterranean have turned to dust. But the stories remain. They continue because they speak to something timeless within humanity. The desire to overcome challenges. The hope that our choices matter. The belief that even when the path ahead seems impossible, courage can carry us forward. Perseus began his life as someone others tried to control. His grandfather feared him. Kings attempted to use him. Fate seemed to decide his future before he could choose it. But through every challenge, Perseus discovered who he truly was. He became more than the prophecies surrounding his birth, more than the monsters he defeated, more than the gifts given to him by the gods. He became a symbol of perseverance. And that is why, after thousands of years, his story still echoes. Because the journey of Perseus is ultimately not only the story of a hero from ancient Greece. It is the story of anyone who faces uncertainty, finds courage and continues moving forward into the unknown. The legend of Perseus has lasted for thousands of years, but the reason it continues to be remembered is not only because of the incredible events that filled his life. It is because Perseus represents something deeper. He represents the journey from uncertainty to purpose, from fear to courage, from being shaped by circumstances to discovering the power to shape his own future. The ancient Greeks understood that a hero was not simply someone who defeated enemies. A hero was someone who faced challenges that seemed impossible and found a way forward. A hero was someone who carried responsibility when others could not. A hero was someone who discovered their own strength through hardship. Perseus' journey followed this pattern. At the beginning of his story, he was powerless. He was an infant whose fate was controlled by others. King Acrisius feared a prophecy and attempted to prevent the future by imprisoning Danae and abandoning Perseus. But the actions meant to destroy him became the beginning of his legend. The sea that was supposed to carry him away instead delivered him to a new life. The fisherman Dictys provided kindness when Perseus and his mother had nowhere else to turn. And the island of Seriphos became the place where the young hero grew into the person he was meant to become. This was a common theme in Greek mythology. Heroes were often not created through comfort. They were shaped through challenges. The difficult moments of their lives revealed who they truly were. Perseus' greatest achievements did not come because his path was easy. They came because he continued when the path was difficult. When he was sent to retrieve Medusa's head, many believed he would fail. The task was designed to be impossible. Medusa was not a normal opponent. She was a creature whose power could defeat anyone who looked directly at her. A warrior relying only on strength would have no chance. But Perseus succeeded because he understood something important. Every challenge has a weakness. Every obstacle has a solution. The hero's greatest weapon was not the sword given to him by the gods. It was his ability to think. The shield of Athena represented this perfectly. It allowed Perseus to face danger without being destroyed by it. Rather than meeting Medusa's power directly, he found another way. He used wisdom instead of force. This idea became one of the most lasting lessons of his story. Strength is valuable, but strength guided by wisdom is far more powerful. The rescue of Andromeda revealed another important part of Perseus' character. After defeating Medusa, he could have returned home seeking only reward and recognition. Instead, he stopped when he saw someone in need. He had no obligation to help Andromeda. Her kingdom was not his. Her problem was not his responsibility. Yet Perseus chose to act. This was what transformed him from a skilled warrior into a true hero. He did not use his abilities only for personal gain. He used them to protect others. Throughout mythology, the greatest heroes were often defined by their choices. Not just what they could do, but what they chose to do with their abilities. Perseus also showed the dangers of pride. His enemies often suffered because they believed they were more powerful than they truly were. Polydectes believed his position as king made him untouchable. Acrisius believed he could outsmart destiny. But both learned that power without wisdom could lead to destruction. The ancient Greeks frequently warned about hubris, the excessive pride that caused people to believe they were above consequences. Perseus avoided this mistake. Despite everything he accomplished, he did not become arrogant. He did not believe himself to be a god. He remained connected to the people who helped him. He remembered his mother's suffering. He honored Dictys' kindness. He listened to the guidance of the gods. His humility became part of his greatness. The story of Perseus also explored the complicated relationship between fate and choice. The Greeks often believed that certain events were destined to happen. The prophecy surrounding Acrisius seemed unavoidable. No matter how carefully he planned, he could not escape what had been foretold. Yet the story also showed that choices mattered. The way people responded to their circumstances shaped who they became. Perseus could not control how he was born. He could not control being abandoned. He could not control the challenges placed before him. But he could control how he responded. He could choose courage. He could choose kindness. He could choose wisdom. And those choices created his legacy. Perhaps this is why Perseus remains such an enduring figure. His story is not about someone who was born powerful and remained powerful. It is about someone who began with uncertainty and discovered his own abilities along the way. It is about someone who faced fear and continued forward. It is about someone who found meaning in helping others. The world has changed dramatically since ancient Greeks first told the story of Perseus. Cities have risen and fallen. Languages have changed. New discoveries have transformed the way people understand the world. But the questions at the center of his story remain. How do we face challenges we never expected? How do we respond when life seems unfair? How do we become the people we hope to be? The legend of Perseus suggests that heroes are not created in moments of victory alone. They are created through every choice that comes before, every moment of patience, every act of courage, every decision to keep moving forward. The young man who once drifted helplessly across the sea became a figure whose name reached the stars. Not because his journey was easy, but because he continued despite everything that stood in his way. And that is the true meaning of the legend of Perseus. A hero is not someone who never faces fear. A hero is someone who faces fear and chooses to continue. The story of Perseus began with a question. Could anyone escape their fate? A prophecy had warned King Acrisius that his daughter's son would one day cause his downfall. Terrified by what the future might hold, the king attempted to control destiny itself. He locked away Danae. He tried to prevent the birth of a child. And when Perseus was born, he sent his daughter and grandson away, believing that he could remove the danger forever. But the ancient Greeks understood something that would become one of the most important lessons of mythology. Fate is not always something that can be defeated. Sometimes, the path people take to avoid destiny is the very path that leads them toward it. Yet the story of Perseus is not only a story about fate. It is a story about what people do when faced with circumstances they cannot control. Perseus did not choose the events surrounding his birth. He did not choose to be abandoned. He did not choose the challenges placed before him. But throughout his life, he chose how he would respond. And those choices transformed him. From a child lost at sea, he became a hero who crossed oceans. From someone without power, he became a protector of kingdoms. From someone whose future was decided by others, he became someone who shaped his own legend. The journey of Perseus carried him through some of the greatest wonders and dangers of the ancient world. He walked among kings. He received gifts from the gods. He traveled beyond familiar lands. He faced creatures that seemed impossible to defeat. But every challenge taught him something. The Greed taught him that knowledge could be more valuable than strength. The nymphs taught him that preparation was essential. Athena taught him the power of wisdom. Medusa taught him that even the greatest dangers could be overcome with patience and intelligence. Andromeda taught him that true heroism came from helping others. Each part of his journey shaped him into the person he would become. This was the way of the ancient heroes. They were not simply born extraordinary. They became extraordinary through their experiences. The path of a hero was not a straight road. It was filled with uncertainty. It required sacrifice. It demanded courage even when success was not guaranteed. Perseus' greatest moments came not because he never felt fear, but because he continued despite it. When he entered Medusa's cave, he knew he could fail. When he faced the sea monster, he knew the creature was dangerous. When he returned to Seriphos, he did not know how Polydectes would respond. At every stage, Perseus stepped into the unknown. And that willingness to move forward became the foundation of his legend. The ancient Greeks often looked to heroes as examples of human potential. They knew that people were not perfect. They knew that life could be unfair. They knew that suffering and uncertainty were unavoidable parts of existence. But through their stories, they explored the possibility that people could rise above those difficulties. Perseus represented that hope. His story reminded ancient audiences that greatness could come from unexpected places. A child abandoned in a wooden chest could become a hero. A person with no kingdom could save one. A young man facing an impossible task could succeed through courage and wisdom. The legend also carried warnings. The downfall of Perseus showed the danger of allowing fear to control decisions. The actions of Polydectes showed the dangers of selfish ambition. The story of Medusa showed that myths often contain tragedy as well as triumph. The ancient Greeks understood that life was complicated. Heroes could win victories and still experience loss. Great accomplishments could come with difficult consequences. The world of mythology was not a simple place where every story ended perfectly. Instead, it reflected the challenges of being human. Perhaps that is why Perseus remains so memorable. His story contains everything that has fascinated people for generations. Adventure, mystery, danger, loss. It is a story about monsters and gods, but it is also a story about people. About a mother protecting her child. About a young man searching for his place in the world. About strangers offering kindness. About the choices that define a person. Long after the temples of ancient Greece became ruins, the story of Perseus remained alive. Poets continued telling it. Artists continued portraying it. Stars continued carrying his name across the night sky. The constellation of Perseus became a reminder of the hero who once traveled across a world filled with uncertainty. And somewhere beneath those same stars, people continued to tell stories of courage. Because every generation faces its own challenges. Every person encounters moments when the path ahead seems impossible. Every person must decide how they will respond when life does not go according to plan. The story of Perseus offers a simple but lasting message. A person's beginning does not determine their ending. The circumstances of life may shape the journey, but they do not have to define the destination. Courage can be discovered, wisdom can be learned, strength can be developed, and even those who begin with uncertainty can accomplish extraordinary things. The hero who once drifted helplessly across the sea became one of the greatest figures in Greek mythology. Not because he was without fear, not because he was without hardship, but because he continued moving forward. From the shores of Seriphos to the halls of distant kingdoms, from the darkness of Medusa's island to the endless stars above, the journey of Perseus became more than an ancient tale. It became a reminder that every person carries the possibility of becoming something greater than they ever imagined. And so, beneath the quiet night sky, the legend of Perseus continues. A story carried across thousands of years. A story of destiny and choice. A story of courage and compassion. A story of a hero who discovered that the greatest victories are not always won by defeating monsters. Sometimes, they are won by discovering the strength within ourselves. As the final moments of Perseus' story fade into the quiet of the ancient world, we are left with more than a tale of monsters, heroes, and gods. We are left with a story about transformation. A story about a child who began life surrounded by uncertainty and became one of the greatest heroes ever remembered. A story about a person who faced challenges far beyond his understanding and discovered that courage could carry him through even the darkest moments. The journey of Perseus began long before he ever held a sword. It began with fear. King Perseus, frightened by a prophecy that his daughter's son would one day cause his downfall, attempted to control the future. He believed that by changing the circumstances of the present, he could escape what was meant to happen. But fate had other plans. The child he feared became the very hero whose name would echo through history. Perseus' early life was filled with hardship. He was abandoned at sea. He grew up far from the home he was meant to know. He faced a world where powerful people made decisions that affected his life before he was old enough to understand them. Yet these challenges did not define him. Instead, they became the foundation of his story. Because heroes are not created by easy lives. They are created by the moments when life demands something greater from them. When Perseus was sent to retrieve the head of Medusa, he was given a task that seemed impossible. The Gorgon was not defeated through brute force. She was defeated through patience, wisdom, and careful preparation. With the guidance of Athena, the speed of Hermes, and the gifts of the nymphs, Perseus discovered that the greatest victories do not always belong to the strongest person in the room. Sometimes, they belong to the person who can think clearly when others cannot. He learned that courage was not about charging blindly into danger. Courage was about understanding the danger and choosing to move forward anyway. After defeating Medusa, Perseus could have returned home seeking only glory. Instead, his journey continued when he discovered Andromeda waiting for rescue. He did not know her. He owed her nothing, but he saw someone in need, and he chose to help. This moment revealed the true nature of his heroism. A hero is not defined only by the enemies they defeat. A hero is defined by the people they choose to protect. The story of Perseus also reminds us that power carries responsibility. The head of Medusa gave him incredible strength, but the way he used that power showed his character. He could have allowed anger to control him. He could have become like the rulers who had harmed him. Instead, he chose wisdom. He understood that having power was not the same as knowing how to use it. This lesson has remained relevant throughout history. The greatest leaders are not those who seek power for themselves. They are those who use what they have to serve others. The legend of Perseus also carries a reminder about humility. Many of the figures who fell in Greek mythology did so because they believed themselves to be above consequences. Perseus believed he could outsmart destiny. Polydectes believed his authority made him untouchable. But Perseus succeeded because he remained willing to listen, learn, and accept help. His greatness came not from believing he was better than everyone else. It came from understanding that even heroes need guidance. Thousands of years have passed since the first stories of Perseus were told. The ancient cities where these tales were shared have changed. The temples have become ruins. The voices of the original storytellers have long disappeared. But the story remains. It remains because it speaks to something universal. Everyone faces moments of uncertainty. Everyone encounters challenges they never expected. Everyone must decide how they will respond when the path ahead becomes difficult. The legend of Perseus reminds us that our beginnings do not have to determine our endings. We may not choose every challenge that comes our way. We may not control every event that shapes our lives. But we can choose our response. We can choose patience instead of panic, wisdom instead of arrogance, compassion instead of selfishness, courage instead of fear. That is why Perseus continues to be remembered, not simply because he defeated Medusa, not simply because he rescued a princess, not simply because his name was placed among the stars. He is remembered because his journey reflects something deeply human, the desire to overcome hardship, the hope that we can become more than our circumstances, the belief that even someone who begins with nothing can accomplish something extraordinary. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson hidden within the ancient story of Perseus. Heroes are not born knowing exactly who they are. They discover themselves through the challenges they face. They grow through uncertainty. They become stronger through adversity. And sometimes, the moments that seem like the greatest obstacles become the moments that reveal their greatest strengths. So as the stars shine over the same skies that ancient Greeks once watched, the legend of Perseus continues to travel onward. A story of a child who survived the sea, a hero who defeated monsters, and a person who discovered that greatness was not found in power alone. It was found in how he used that power. And beneath the endless night sky, the name of Perseus remains. A reminder that even when the journey ahead seems impossible, there is always the possibility of becoming something greater than we ever imagined. Good night.